So let's talk a bit more about how important press is today compared since the old days, or how do you influence the communities right now? Is it social media, YouTube, and all the stuff like that? What is important right now to get in touch with the people out there and to play your games?
It's probably all of it.
Well, but what's interesting though, since you said then versus now, I mean, prior to these online communities on the internet, the combination of the press and retail shelf space was it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the only, you had to announce the existence of your game and with full page ads in a magazine. You pretty much had to back that up with buying not just shelf space, but face on shelf space, you know, during the launch of your product, because that was really the only way anybody would know that it existed. And so that was a battle, was to buy those things. Of course, you know, what's unfortunate about press, even as it's become digital, so you could still imagine that same thing happening digitally. But digital has sort of been this, when we were offline here, we were talking about the politics and alternate facts and fake news and this sort of thing. Well, that also happens in digital press around games. Now, where it used to be, anybody writing an article in print was a professional on a monthly deadline, it had editors, it was... if not fair and balanced, you at least had another monthly cycle to go all argue and debate and try to rectify how the press felt about you. Nowadays that's been wiped out. Not only does really nobody read the press, and there's almost no retail shelf space that's nearly as influential. Everything now is digital, but it's a very different beast to manage today. In contrast to what it was really just even 5 years ago. I mean,
that's why I said pretty much all of it. You get to manage the channels that you have. Of course, it also depends on the age group that you're targeting for your game. If we're making a game for 16 to 20-year-olds, they don't read those traditional magazines anymore. They go to YouTube, they go to Instagram or whatever. They check out what some blogger is posting, what some influencer is actually telling, Let's Player or something is saying about the game. So we definitely got to step up our game in that regard and make sure that we get better connections to all those guys, and not the big ones. I don't think it's smart to approach like guys like PewDiePie or Gronk here in Germany or whatever. You got to go to the guys who have a meaningful audience, who are maybe specialized in a certain genre or a certain type of games, and then you talk to them and give them your game and let them play it, review it, and have this connection with them where they have a little bit of insight into what's going on in your team. That's kind of the level of dedication that you need to have to make that work. Traditional press is still there, I guess, for Shadow the Avatar, because of your personality and the history of Ultimas and so on. I think press is a little more relevant than it is for other games that we make. Then you gotta figure out who you want to talk to, try to find the biggest portals online, or even print magazines. It's usually the same ones. Actually, it's a mix of those, and figure out who you want to talk to, you want to provide with the info, and I think that is important too. But it's got to be that mix. And one thing that we figured out, you have to be super active as a company in talking about your game also on social media channels, and that is something that can consume a lot of time, and you better do it right. There's no point in starting some social media activity and you post like 4 times a day, and the next day you post 2 times, and then for 4 weeks nothing is coming. You got to make sure that you have a
regular cadence.
Certain cadence to it, and you have to post something regularly. People need to know every Wednesday or every day or something cool is coming out, so they actually stay in touch with your game or your company or whatever you're trying to achieve.
And I think also, at least one of the things I feel about that is it needs to be done at a variety of levels within the organization. Yesterday I was mentioning Min Liang Tan from Razer, and since I follow him, I get Razer news. But what's interesting is I follow Razer the company, and I follow him individually, and he's really the one who he's regularly talking about his own company and his own products, and he's the guy. So you go like, oh, I like hearing it from the guy. Mm-hmm. And so I think as company principals, the community wants to hear all the news. So even from the generic company box is of course important, but I think it's just as important in our case that they hear from the artists. Star does his very precisely weekly and monthly long, communication streams with detail and accuracy. I fly off the cuff, but I'm doing it 10 times a day. And I think the community appreciates all of that. They appreciate hearing from the guy that's literally working on the art that they're seeing and that they get to interact with and maybe respond to and talk about, pirate ships or whatever they're building that day. And they enjoy hearing from me about how I think of the world and how the game is working and either love or hate the politics that I also communicate about. And then, of course, for the meat of it, they look to Star in his regular cadence. And that's all essential to maintaining that community connection.
Absolutely. I think what changed from the past to now is that in the past, some of the editors at those big magazines, they were the rock stars. They were the ones you followed, you read everything, and they were actually making or breaking a game to some extent. At least here in Germany, I think it was the same in the States. You know these guys. I mean, you guys have been around really long, and there's probably a lot of those people. By the way, some of them I met in person. They're super nice, and some of them I met a couple of years later. It's like, oh my God, how did I ever believe this was a hero of mine when I was little? So, but anyway, that changed. It's still about people, but now it's about the people we were talking about. It's about developers working on the game. It's about some people writing for an online magazine. You follow them like individually usually, and I couldn't agree more. It's actually important that you do that. I try to be relatively active on social media as well. For me, it's not Twitter, it's other channels, but I try to be there and post things that I like, that I enjoy, and some people happen to be interested in that, which is good. And that's, I think, what people are looking for these days, because they want to have a variety of like impressions about something that's going on, and they have their favorites they want to follow.
So beside this press release in the old days with whatever press kit with screenshots and stuff like that, you should now more or less talk from the early stage of your game, in my opinion. And
Absolutely.
even, we're trying with social media a lot here. We do live videos, whatever. When someone is painting on his wacom board, we have a live video. We have 500 guys watching live. And there was this kind of nice story about a girl watching that, and she's now doing a traineeship here at Henningham. So again, we have this one person who reached with this one idea we had, and now we have someone who attending next year the team.
Absolutely. So it's super crucial, especially for games that have been on Kickstarter, like Shroud the Avatar, like Crowfall, that we immediately work with. You've always been public in a way. You've always been there, and you talked about everything that's going on. I think it's crucial to the success of the game. You want to make sure that you keep that level of information to the community high, and it's something that we at Travian Games have to improve a little, because that was nothing we did in the past that much. And quite frankly, some of the browser games are just not exciting to watch somebody play, because it's like those long-term games, and it's not a lot of fun. But more recent games that we're making, it's much better to do that, actually. And streamability and the ability to show something is actually one of the very important things for new games that we're going to make.
But you need to be very open-minded. You need the guys in the team where you can take a photo, not, I don't want to get a photo. This is hard to do at the end of the day. Or even on the Facebook side, let's take Facebook as an example. They are changing so often their algorithms for your news feed. It's just last week harder. It's even harder. If someone works well and they want to push a new feature, then you have to do this new feature. So as a small team, you always have to watch, what's coming up next, even on the social media networks. You have to be, again, one step ahead, and also take consumer time.
And I think there's so many communication pathways now, and people gravitate to the one that suits their desires, and where their community of friends has moved so quickly that you have to, frankly, have to manage them all. Which is non-trivial. I even think about YouTube streamers, and I agree with your go to a specialized mid-tier person is usually more effective. It's easier to accomplish and more effective at the same time. But what's interesting is, I don't watch very many YouTube streams myself, but as so I'm bought between my children and my employees. It was interesting to find that my children, who can't type, so they're only doing by picture suggestions in the YouTube feed, always end up on things like these unboxing shows for toys.
My daughter is not even 3, and she does that.
And I'm going,
watching these.
I'm going like, well, I don't get it, but obviously it works. And I have a similar feeling with my employees, who I'll go into the art room and watch the artists, sketching something, and on the other monitor, they'll be watching somebody stream one of the other games that they like. And I walk in there and I'm just mystified. I'm going like, is that really that entertaining that, you know, I mean, and they're only having to pay half attention because they're really drawing. But obviously there's some magic happening there that at least it's not quite for me in all these cases. But it's obviously very powerful because I can see it, you know, happening all around me. And so for me, for example, you know, we have our company forums that our community knows to go to and likes to see all the developers posting on, including me. But actually, and I try to be there and post also, but my actual personal favorite forum is Twitter. And the reason for me is just one of practicality. If I go to someplace like Facebook or our forums, when somebody has a question for me, they will write paragraphs. And I don't have time to read that, much less write an intelligent response. On the other hand, if somebody sends a tweet to me, not only do I read every tweet that I've ever received, but I can usually respond to every retweet that I've ever received. And that one's relatively easy for me to keep up with. So for me, that's just a way that I can be deeply communicative with anybody who chooses to want to communicate. And then I go to the others to participate, you know, on a cadence to make sure they know I'm still paying attention and listening. But other people have made different decisions. You know, just you all go to the feed that fits your lifestyle and communication bandwidth.
I'm still old school. For me, apparently, it's Facebook. You know, I'm still active there.
Welcome on board.
I heard it's like for the old people. You know,
Yeah, that's me.
It apparently is. I'm doing really badly with the YouTube streams.
So I must be slightly younger at Twitter, but probably not nearly as young as.
The thing is, like, Twitter is much bigger in the States than it's here in Europe.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's still actively used, and I'm on Twitter and sometimes do something, but like not a lot. In the States, that's what people use. So I observed the behavior of myself. Whenever I go to the States, I start using Twitter again. Whenever I come back to Germany, I realize there's actually not a lot going on. So I stop using it and switch back to Facebook. But you're right. You got to pick your poison. Pretty much, you got to pick the one thing where you want to be active. But
someone on the team better be tackling all of it.
Exactly, and that's what we're trying to do. You got to have somebody on Instagram. You got to have somebody on Snapchat, maybe, depending on the community you have. So it's very important that you.
You know, even groups. I was on right after my space flight. I was on the NASA Advisory Council for about 6 years, and it was interesting to see even organizations like NASA grapple with the new ways of communicating to people and getting people enthusiastic about, for example, NASA. And, you know, big organizations often want to control all the communication. They have fear of somebody showing something that looks unprofessional or not government approved or whatever it might be.
Not only big organizations. I know that, Marco.
Yeah. But what they found was one of the most popular people they had during this period was when the space shuttle would land, it deploys a parachute to slow down. And so that parachute has to be repacked. And so the guy that repacked this giant parachute on the back of the space shuttle just decided he'd put up some webcams and he would talk to people while he's showing the size and scale and lines, and it became super popular. The guy repacking the parachutes, you know, every shuttle flight, and for NASA that was a big lesson to realize that, you know, there's a community of space enthusiasts, like there's a community of handy enthusiasts, there's a Travian enthusiasts, Lord British enthusiasts, you know, that. They just want to see behind the curtain. They just want to go, you know, it's you know, I enjoy the final product, but it's just as important to kind of see how the sausage is made, you know.
It's usually about cool stories that you wouldn't see otherwise.
I think that's
you got to relate to something there. If here you have an artist like drawing something, you usually don't see that. You can't go into some office and just check it out. But if you show it to the people, that's kind of cool. You know, maybe they want to make a decision about what they want to do in life based on that. So
and even like me, just walking through your office, looking at the Luftwaffe game in development there. You know, just watching a person lay out the bitmap screens for bridges and things they were working on. I'm going like, wow, that's really cool, because it reminded me of the times that I was personally even had spent doing some of these similar things. And I'm going like, wow, it's cool to see how that has evolved and how it's developing and how it's going to manifest in the game. So yeah.
And people have a different taste, you know.
I think it's all about stories. I think this is why we
and persons.
Yeah, persons,
stories, people.
People and their stories.
Yeah.
And you have to find stories all the time, you know, to attract people, to attract press and whatever, you know. I think it's not that easy. So you have to have maybe more new products, whatever, new features you talk about, maybe a history, whatever, but they need to be entertained. I think this is different. You have to entertain the press more or less at the old days, and now you have to entertain all the players, the community.
And the thing is, like, since we said stories and people, and I totally agree with that, sometimes the people that are in charge of your PR department or your marketing are not the best storytellers. Sometimes and more often than not, they're not. So but there might be people in your company that actually love to be in front of a camera. Maybe they are an actor or something in their free time and do something like that, and they just enjoy doing that or don't care about it, whatever. And those are the ones you actually want to have for making videos and for showing what they do. And sometimes it doesn't matter too much what they actually do. It's about how entertaining they are. We have a couple of people in the company that whatever they talk about is always kind of entertaining, and those are the guys that I want to watch. If they talk about cleaning the coffee makers, why not? Or how to change the towel rolls in our electronic towel dispensers. We have people doing that.
Or even sometimes, it's like I'm thinking of an artist out of RST, and his name is Bob, and he's a pretty shy, pretty quiet guy, but we can convince him to go on camera, and when he does, he will often do something a little silly or self-deprecating as sort of a way to hide in the corner in some sense of the word. But he's actually the most popular guy on the team. Whenever he comes on the camera, everybody's always watching because they know he's going to do something subtle but humorous as his kind of way to participate but stay in the back. And so he was called out on that by the community in this most recent live stream we did, and he actually took great joy and pride in being kind of a community favorite, despite his shyness.
Yeah. So are you afraid about anything on social media like Reddit or something like that?
Why would you be afraid? The thing is,
shitstorm that you cannot control at all or even cannot communicate really.
The thing is, of course, there's some things that are not good for your game that happen there, and you always have to figure out how you manage that best. I mean, sometimes you have cases where there's individuals, shit-talking you somehow, and then you got to talk about how you deal with that. And sometimes the solution is you get in touch with them and give them personal airtime or something and sort it out. Sometimes you just make sure there's there's other people that talk good about your games, and then they become white noise, like the trolls that you have. It's important that you figure out your strategy for that, but I'm not afraid of shitstorms. We've had a couple of those, if you will, about features that we introduced and so on, but we never kind of blocked forum access for those people or kind of stuff. We try to make sure that people have a space to vent and figure out what we're going to do. And sometimes we just go in and talk to them for a longer time. Sometimes Garriott, our founder, goes in and talks to the people. We had 3 super critical guys for our games, and we invited them and kind of talked to them, asked them for the feedback, and that usually helps for most people.
Only one more question is about who should do it. Because you said you have a partner. So is he doing it? Are you doing it? Or both?
Yeah, let's say both. There's some things that only Richard can do, because that's about his personality as Lord British, and then he's the best to answer. But I hope that after like a couple more months of working together, we instantly know who should actually react on something, and we do that.
Yeah, I mean, as long as
for Europe, we kind of know some of those guys, and we are the better ones to get in touch with them. But it really depends.
Yeah, and as long as you're on the same page as to what the goal is, and we've already been working together long enough to where we are on the same page, then all hands on deck is essential. But there's sometimes certain messages better delivered by certain people.
Let's do some kind of sum up. What are your learnings of such a legend, on the games market?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things I've learned through the years is, first of all,